I'm Clack the Geek here, and welcome to the penultimate video in the James Bond mini-marathon series. I'm Clack the Geek, and today we're on Pierce Brosnan's era with Tomorrow Never Dies from 1997. So, the Pierce Brosnan era really did change a lot with the Bond series, and it's from GoldenEye onwards. I call that like the modern era of James Bond. You know, back in the late 80s, there were a lot of troubles with Bond. License to Kill did the worst at the box office. And there were a lot of other legal issues, which meant Timothy Dalton's proposed third film, Property of a Lady, never came to fruition. This ultimately led to Dalton stepping down from the part, and also as well, the Cold War had ended in 1990, which is why Bond was created at the height of the Cold War during the 1950s by Ian Fleming in his books. But then the Cold War ended, people were like, well, what's the need for James Bond anymore? But GoldenEye, after a 6-year wait, proved that, yes, James Bond can still work in a modern world. There were so many changes, though, in this new this kind of soft reboot. So, Cubby Broccoli had handed down producing role to his daughter Barbara Broccoli, and also Michael G. Wilson. You obviously had a recast Bond with Pierce Brosnan. You had a new M, played by Judi Dench. You had a new Moneypenny. You had various people. Q stayed the same. Desmond Llewellyn was still Q, which led to some cracking Q scenes still.
Right, now pay attention 007, this is vitally important. A Class A grenade here. 3 clicks, activates the fuse. Another 3 disarms it.
So, how long was the fuse again, Q?
Oh, grow up, will you, 007. Oh, dear Lord.
But you also had a new title sequence designer, you had a new composer, you had so much new stuff, and it was a new tone. It was totally different. So how does this film hold up? Let's find out. So let's start off with talking about Pierce Brosnan as Bond. Now, I really underestimated him because I didn't think I'd be too fussed on him. A lot of my family aren't really keen on him. Ronnie says Pierce Brosnan his least favourite, but I have to say I really like Pierce Brosnan as Bond. I think he does the humour really well. He does the sort of cool charisma and like suaveness really well. In a similar way to how Connery did it. He can do the action brilliantly, he can do the grittiness stuff. He does it really well, but the main criticism I have with Brosnan, it's not specific to this film, but the majority of his films is that he's sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. You know, each of the Bonds have something that they excel at. So Roger Moore, comedy, Timothy Dalton, grittiness, Daniel Craig, emotional, etc, etc. Pierce Brosnan is the only Bond I feel that doesn't quite have that. And if anybody wants to say, you know, what they would say is Pierce Brosnan's defining quality, then let me know and I might agree with you, but from where I stand at the minute, I don't think I can say, but other than that, I think Brosnan is fantastic. Now let's talk about the Bond girls. So first of all, you have Paris Carver, and the Bond girls of this film, I feel like, is one of my main bugbears, because there is so much missed potential with them. So with Paris Carver, this is something brilliant that they do. She is a former lover of Bond, that Bond, you know, happens to stumble across again. That is such a brilliant idea and a really good sort of flip of the trope. You know, it's like what GoldenEye did with having a former 00 agent as the villain with Sean Bean's character, or The World Is Not Enough having the main Bond girl Electra being the main Bond villain. I love what those Brosnan films did, but here its execution doesn't quite work, and I think it's because we've never met this Paris Carver character, so there's sort of a disconnect. I think if it was a character that we'd seen before, like maybe recast, or maybe bring back an actor. Maybe they could have brought back somebody from one of the Dalton films, like maybe Mariam DeBow or Carol Llewellyn back, maybe. But a brilliant idea, just not executed properly, in my opinion. She's also not in the film an awful lot, so I don't get very attached. Yeah, there was a lot of wasted potential there. But then for the majority of the film, you have Wei Lin as the main Bond girl, and I think she's a very good character. She gets a lot of the action. She's really cool, but the main problem I have, again, it's just the chemistry between her and Brosnan, it's not quite there for me. So that's kind of a bit of that's one of the things that draws this film down. But something that brings the film way back up is Jonathan Pryce as the villain, Elliot Carver. He's essentially like a media mogul. He's got a newspaper company, and you know, he's sort of manipulating and being very sly behind the scenes, trying to pit England and China against each other in war and the Navy and that kind of stuff. And I love Jonathan Pryce, Elliot Carver. I mean, he's a fantastic actor just generally, but he's clearly having a lot of fun in this role, and actors always say that villains are the most fun to play, you know. And he's a proper megalomaniac, you know. I love a sort of villain like Sean Bean in GoldenEye or Robert Darby in License to Kill, but I also love a good megalomaniac kind of villain. And he's just fantastic. He's an absolute scene stealer in this film, and, you know, he's got a good plan. He just, yeah, he's probably the best thing about this film. He's just phenomenal. Now let's quickly talk about the henchman, Mr. Stamper, who's kind of like a bit of a brute, you know, the more physical guy. He's fine. He's fine. There's just not a lot to him, you know. He's one of the more forgettable henchmen in the series for me, and yeah, he's fine. Overall, this film has a really good story. You know, the plot is, you know, it's kind of similar to some of the other films like You Only Live Twice or Spoiler of Me. You know, the villain is acting as like the third party, the middleman, trying to pit two nations against each other, but it's done in a different enough way in this film. It's more manipulative and sly, as opposed to like using force and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think it's really good. And the way it's sort of the whole like, fake news kind of message, it's always a good message to put in something. But even though it's something that we see a lot today, I imagine back in the late 90s it wasn't as common. You will sometimes find little messages in Bond films. Sometimes, if you look deep enough, like in Goldfinger, there's the whole stuff about, you know, gold and its worth and that kind of stuff. And they're not at the forefront necessarily, but I feel in the Brosnan era they did push them just that little bit more, and I appreciate that. This film is directed by Roger, I can't pronounce his surname. Anyway, I think his direction is really good. It was the only film in the franchise that he directed, but it was really good. The cinematography is really nice, the lighting looks very nice, especially in that party scene. It does look really nice. And his direction lends so well to the action. This film has a more bombastic sort of balls to the wall action, you know. Brosnan's wielding double machine guns and there's explosion after explosion after explosion. And I get that it might be a bit too much for some, but if you can roll with it, you'll have a great time. And I don't think you can complain because of how well the action is done in this film. I mean, you've got some really good stuff, like the finale's really good. You've got that incredible BMW multi-story action scene. That is just incredible. The remote control BMW, that is one of the best Bond cars. It's just kitted out and it's brilliant, isn't it? And that's the thing with this film, it's such a fun romp. It's so energetic and a lot of fun to watch. And it kind of reminds me of that Roger Moore kind of style, but without being too goofy or anything like that. It's just fun. And that's why I'm going to give this film an 8 out of 10. It's got its flaws, but I have a lot of fun with this film. So I hope you enjoyed the video. What do you think of this film? What do you think of Pierce Brosnan's James Bond? Let me know all that in the comments below. And join me next week for the final of this James Bond marathon series as we let the sky fall. I can't think of any other decent puns now. I'll see you then.